Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and I have de-hobofied myself, as you can see, so I can come on here and talk about the my review for Shadows of Change. Now, because I have a lot of things going on, this isn't going to be one of those fancy, crazy ones where there's going to be like lots of cool footage and stuff, unless my editor is feeling particularly spicy and has an extra amount of free time, wants to throw in some relevant images, but that's up to him. I'm just going to talk about my thoughts. So I've kind of organized just a little sheet that has everything that's in the DLC, and I'm just going to very, very briefly touch on everything, and then I am going to kind of sum everything up at the end about my overall thoughts, because there's tons and tons and tons of footage of me playing on Twitch and even on YouTube, and I've also been like talking pretty much nonstop about this, but now I can just be very, very frank about everything and not have to worry about like saying it a certain way. Because of embargoes, because they're all gone now. So, let's start with the Changeling for Tzeentch. The Changeling is exceptionally fun. Very, very powerful character, has a lot of really unique and interesting gimmicks, some that you probably will not expect, and that despite being a Chaos faction, a Monogod / Demon faction, whatever you want to call it, the Changeling has some really interesting incentives for making alliances with other factions. I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say he's great at it. He's better than you might think. He does have a system where you do not take settlements. Instead, you run around and you put little parasite undercities inside everybody else's cities. So it kind of functionally makes you unkillable, which can make it a very, very fun campaign for if you just want to screw around and have a good time and not worry about stressing. But it also can offer some kind of unique challenges as well, because you're really just kind of running around with your armies, trying not to get your armies crushed, because building new ones up can be kind of time consuming. But there are some very interesting ways you can use these cities, in that if you build they're essentially two different kinds of buildings, which are the parasitic buildings and the symbiotic buildings. If you build parasitic buildings, you are going to be stealing a lot of money and really screwing with whoever city you happen to be under. It's more likely you're going to be discovered, and therefore your cult will be destroyed, but you can get some really powerful benefits out of it, including doing things like sacking the city without actually attacking it, and all sorts of other goofy shenanigans. But you can heavily increase the corruption in that area. You can spawn in a demon army, though the spawning in of demon armies, it's a cool thing to do, but unfortunately the demon armies that spawn are pretty meh. It's more like a rebellion, not like a big fat 20 stack, so it tends to die super quick. But it's also, not under your direct control, so who cares? There are some other gimmicks you can do to summon an army under your control, but those armies, you control them, so you can have them run off and do other things if you want. But what's interesting about the symbiotic buildings, on the other hand, is while they're not quite as good as far as like stealing money and things like that, you can use them to help the faction whose city you're hiding under, and you can even buff your diplomacy with that faction. So if there's somebody you really want to be friends with, there are some really interesting ways that you can set up a bunch of undercities using your cultists and keep trying to benefit them and build the buildings that give you diplomacy buffs, because this can then result in you befriending whoever you want. So the Changeling does offer some really fun alternative play styles. He's not just running around being the asshole trickster that is just a pain in everybody's ass. You can do some genuinely interesting things, and he does offer some kind of fun like role play in a sense, if you like more of like a storytell feel, like you're trying to accomplish specific tasks. Furthermore, the Changeling himself is exceedingly fun. He can transform into any legendary lord or legendary hero in the game, but in order to do so, you do have to unlock their forms, and the way you do that is either by defeating them in battle with the Changeling. It can't be any of your armies, it has to be the Changeling himself. So you can defeat them in a battle, or you can get at least a defensive alliance with that faction, and you will unlock their legendary lord. Now, when it comes to legendary heroes, the only way to get them is by performing certain schemes, which I'll get into in a moment. But the Changeling himself, extremely powerful. He's got, Tzeentch magic, which is a fairly decent lore. He's got a lot of very, very fun, unique skills where he can buff whoever he transforms into, and he can get access to their skills, abilities, and even their spells when he gets all the way up his little tree for that. As I said earlier, he also has some really interesting gimmicks for alliances in that, to my knowledge, he is one of the only characters in the game that buffs allied units, which is very, very interesting and is something that I want to see a lot more of. Personally, I think it should just be a generic skill available to lots of like lords and heroes where they just buff allied units, because it's not that big of a deal. I'm not sure why it's locked just to the changeling, but I am glad they're exploring that as an avenue, so hopefully we can see it spread around the rest of the game. But so he's really solid if you want to have a lot of allied units from different factions. He's also solid if you just want to be a dick and run around just like kicking everyone in the nuts as hard as you can and then running away. As far as the schemes go, the changeling is not like every other character in the game. He's very unique, genuinely, for a faction in that you are not going to paint the map. That is not something you can do. If you wanted to paint the map with the changeling, the best case scenario is that you just raise everything to the ground. But what he's really about is kind of doing almost a storytelling type game. It's far more narrative focused, which is something kind of all these characters have in common. But the changeling has schemes. So you have minor schemes, because the world is broken up into theaters. So you have like the Empire Theater, Norska and Kislev are a theater, the Chaos Waste, the Mountains of Morn with the Darklands, Grand Cathay, Lustria, Nagaroth, Ulthuan. So you have all these different places you can go to. And when you arrive in those places, there are a series of missions that want you to do certain things. It'll usually be something like set up a cult and then kill this character, or get this region or province to a certain amount of Zinch corruption, or any number of shenanigans. Some of them are quite unique to that theater. Others are a type of performance. So there will be ones that are like, win X amount of land battles against this race, or kill this character, or sack this major city. So there are a couple of them that will kind of repeat, but most of the theaters have at least one fairly unique scheme. Once you pull off enough of the minor schemes, you unlock the major scheme, which the major scheme is a quest battle. It is not a quest battle in the sense that like the changeling doesn't give like a big fancy speech, but it is a quest battle, and it is a very unique conflict where you'll have to deal with rather bizarre circumstances. You might have enemies coming out from all sorts of different directions, and there will be like lots of them potentially, and each of them is themed, so there's a lot of fun diversity. And you can do multiple playthroughs with the changeling and go to just different theaters, because you don't have to beat all of them. You only need 4, I think, or 4 or 5, I think it's 5 grand schemes in order to unlock the ultimate scheme, which the ultimate scheme is your big final epic battle. And what's really fun is that depending on which grand schemes you did, your final battle will be a different experience. Because depending on which grand schemes you do, they will either add allies to your side during the final quest battle, or they will take allies away from your enemy during the final quest battle. So there are some like really interesting things to consider when you're playing through a campaign. And if you play through the changeling multiple times, unless you're just 100%ing him every single time, you will genuinely have a different experience with a lot of his campaign. He also has the ability to create portals and literally teleport anywhere he wants across the world. And they do have a very nice UI setup where when you're kind of zoomed out on the map, you can see where all the different portals are. So it's not a mystery where they're going to appear, and you can kind of plan out your path. So you can decide where you want to go and where you want to antagonize before you go off and do that. Overall, super fun campaign, super fun character. There's also the new legendary hero in the DLC for the Blue Scribes. The Blue Scribes are extremely powerful and very, very fun to play with. They start off kind of mid, but as you unlock all the different lores of magic and you make your way up to the end of their skill tree, they can get genuinely obscene. And if you build an army around them, they have the ability to just buff the living hell out of all of your different horrors. So your pink and blue horrors and your exalted pinks, and they can make an army that is just absolutely hysterical. Plus they get the ability to like unleash the big storm of magic spells that were exclusive to the Realm of Chaos campaign, which is very, very nice. I still want the Realm of Chaos in this game, but you know, we'll get around to that one day. Blue Scribes are a 10 out of 10. One of my favorite legendary heroes in the game. Probably the strongest legendary hero in the game. They're definitely up there with like Lord Croak and Ariel. They're quite strong. And they're available not only to Tzeentch, but also to all of the Warrior of Chaos and Demons of Chaos factions, with the exception of Valkia, Festus, and Azazel. Everyone else on the Warriors of Chaos has access to them, and then, of course, the Demon Prince. As far as Tzeentch's new units, Mutilate Vortex Beast is a big old 10 out of 10. Beautiful unit, beautiful audio design, hits like a truck, has lots of fun, awesome abilities, does everything you would want it to do based on its tabletop and its lore. It deals damage to enemies around it when it's in close combat. It has a permanent buff effect for nearby allies. Absolutely insane animations, and has some really unique interactions using knockdown systems. So it's very good at dealing with large groups of infantry and cavalry, things that tend to be prone to getting thrown around. So it's very, very good against infantry, but it can do some really nice stuns against cavalry as well. Arguably one of my favorite monsters in the game. It's absolutely beautiful to look at, and it's so amazing to see it. Cockatrice, pretty much the same thing. The Cockatrice turned out absolutely fantastic. It does literally everything that it could possibly do, and has some of the most beautiful animations that make me extremely happy to see it. I love the Cockatrice. I was a little worried that there are things that they would kind of skirt on, and I was curious how they were going to handle the Petrifying Gaze, but I think they did a really good job with it, where it does everything it talks about in the lore. It vomits up like horrible acid that has some really gross animations where it's killing people. But it does have its Petrifying Gaze as a passive debuff ability that just debuffs the melee attack of everyone nearby, which is a really solid ability. But it also uses its Petrifying Gaze in some really kick-ass animations where it'll literally like just eye beam people and they turn to stone. Then it picks them up with its tail and like throws the petrified person as a projectile into a unit and kills a bunch of people. It's very, very cool. These two both also have very unique death animations. They don't die normally like regular monsters, where they just kind of like fall on the ground. They have very unique death animations, where the Cockatrice self-petrifies, and the Mutilate Vortex Beast, like its portal snaps off and it screams and then it like falls into the portal. It's crazy. Absolutely insane units. And then there's the Zongors. The Zongors, design-wise, as far as like the function in the game, I think they're pretty cool. They're better than Gors. They start off like pretty on par with Gors, but they have a unique ability that whenever anybody on the battlefield casts a spell, so enemy wizards or your wizards, as spells are thrown around the battlefield, they basically get charged up on all that magic juice, and they get quite a bit stronger. Their damage like just spikes, and they end up going from being like better than Gors to like rivaling best of Gors over the case of a battle, except for their swordboard. So they're, reasonably tanky. I like the way they play. I do not like their design. When you compare them versus literally everything else in the DLC, their design feels very lazy and very uninspired. Considering that Zongors have a fantastic amount of art and beautiful miniatures thanks to Age of Sigmar, the fact that that's the best they could do with Zongors is super disappointing, and it feels like they didn't even try. I don't know if the Zongors were a last second addition or if they thought that was genuinely like the best they could do, but it's not impressive. I've said it before in a video, but I genuinely hope they take another stab at those, maybe during the 4.1 patch or something like that. But other than that, overall, Tzeentch, extremely solid. Really like what all this adds to Tzeentch. And what's quite interesting is this really isn't for Tzeentch alone. The only thing that's Tzeentch exclusive is actually the Changeling. Everything else in the DLC is also available to the Warriors of Chaos, though there's like slight differences. So for instance, if you're playing any of the other Warriors of Chaos, you do get access to the Cockatrice and the Mutilate Vortex Beast, but they're undivided. So they don't have any of the Tzeentch like barrier effects or anything like that, which makes sense. So because they're like undivided creatures, they don't actually take marks. But the Mutilate Vortex or the Zongors are also available to the Beastmen, which is a really nice bonus incentive. I deeply, deeply want them to add the Cockatrice to the Beastmen roster, That's another thing I'm really expecting with patch 4.1. Because the cockatrice is a beastman monster first and foremost. So it's very odd to me that the Warriors of Chaos have access to it, but the beastmen don't. It's also kind of weird to me that the Warriors of Chaos have access to the Zongors. That felt like a very unnecessary addition. It sort of almost kind of felt like they just sort of tossed everything into the Warriors of Chaos roster without thinking. They just were like, just put it over. Like personally, I would have done the Cockatrice and Zongors to the Beastmen and only the Mutilated Vortex Beast to the Warriors. That way they're like kind of exclusive. But it is what it is. So yes, with the exception of the Zongors, Tzeentch, so I like on a grade scale of like 1 to 10, with 1 being like the Grim in the Grave and 10 being Twisted in the Twilight. For Tzeentch specifically, I'd probably put it at about an 8.5. So very good, very good. Not perfect, but very good. On to Kislev, we have Mother Ostankya. So Mother Ostankya, easily my favorite legendary lord in the DLC. She has fantastic theming, beautiful design. She's hysterical. Her writing is actually really, really good, and she says a lot of really interesting things, especially if you're a lore buff. She has a bunch of she has a ton of fantastic dialogue. And I really, really like her voice actress. I think she killed it. But she's extremely powerful, being a wizard artillery chariot that is surprisingly good in close combat. She's kind of not bad. The only thing she's not amazing at is dueling characters. Everything else she is like obscenely good at. But she is a ton of fun. I very, very much like her design and her playstyle and everything. As far as her campaign goes, she kind of has 3 things worth mentioning, which the main core of her campaign are her curses and blessings, which it's kind of similar to Grom's Cauldron, in that you gather ingredients from other races and then you can mix those ingredients together to create bonuses. However, that is like, it's barely, like, only at the surface level is it anything like Grom's system, because you do not have to defeat factions or specific creatures like Grom does. Instead, it's if you beat a faction, you get their ingredient in battle, but you can also get their ingredient by befriending them. So if you enter a defensive alliance with, say, the High Elves, you get the High Elf trinket, which is quite nice, and you don't have to kill like a specific type of creature in order to get the ingredient like Grom does for his thing. Also, where Grom's Cauldron is more of like Grom's army is buffed, or there's like a faction-wide buff, Ostankya is functionally creating banners. However, you can use these, or her hexes and curses, in addition to banners, which is quite nice, and the effects are obscenely powerful. You do need to be doing it as much as you can, because her campaign quite literally revolves around spending her unique resource, which is called Spirit Essence. So it costs you like 5 Spirit Essence to make a basic curse, right? Or a basic blessing. So you need to spend a crazy amount of Spirit Essence over the course of your campaign in order to unlock the final battle. So it's almost a little too much how much it costs to unlock everything. I cannot stress this enough. You need to be spending as much Spirit Essence as possible unless you want the campaign to last for like 150 or 200 turns. Her campaign can be very, very long if you are not spamming creating curses and hexes and your or curses and blessings and your hexes, which we'll get to in a second. But as far as the curses and blessings, they are extremely fun. They're very powerful. There's a lot of customization. Basically, the way it works is that there are different kinds of ingredients. There's 3 of each type, but each of the ingredients in a type has a subtly different effect. So like there's the resistance ingredients, but one of them is about fire resistance, one of them is about spell resistance, and one of them is about physical resistance. So if you apply, say, the fire one, if it's a blessing, it gives the unit flaming attacks. But if it's a curse, it gives them weakness to fire. The spell resistance one, if it's a blessing, it grants you spell resistance. If it's a curse, it removes spell resistance. And then the physical resistance, exact same. Gives you physical resistance or hurts enemy physical resistance. So all the different ingredients have a good version and a bad version. And basically, when you combine them, depending on which types you combine, you'll get different base hexes. And then once you unlock in the tech tree, the ability to include additional ingredients, you can add other ingredients to them. So for instance, you might learn that mixing 2 ingredients will create a hex that, like one of the ones I really, really like, causes the enemy unit that I use it on to get like -9 or 12 melee defense for the entire battle. And it also gives them the rampage effect. So if they start losing a certain amount of health, they'll rampage and go out of control. So I like to make a whole bunch of those and throw them on all the enemy archers so that all I have to do is kind of pepper the enemy ranged units, and then they'll all rampage and run into melee so that I can kill them really, really easy, which is very fun. Or, you know, I'll use it on like a legendary lord so I can just hit them with a bunch of damage and then they'll rampage and I can finish them off easily because they're not going to run away. But there's a whole bunch of different ones. And like I said, although like I can make that curse a bunch of times, there is a ridiculous amount of ways I can make that curse. Because I can make it the normal way, which gives me that debuff plus whatever the initial ingredients that went into it are. So like say I use the ingredient that gives minus physical resistance, and I use another ingredient that gave like -8 leadership. So it has those 3 effects. The rampage melee defense debuff, which is the core curse, and then the 2 ingredients give it the minus physical resist and minus leadership. But then once I unlock it in my tech tree, I have 2 more slots that I can use to further augment it. So I could give it like minus speed buff, or you know, a bunch of other different ones. They're very, very powerful. I honestly think her campaign mechanic is one of the strongest in the game, because you can make so many hexes and curses and blessings. And you could just and when you go into a battle, every unit on the enemy side and your side can have 1 blessing or curse attached. So if you have 20 curses and 20 blessings, and it's a 20 stack versus 20 stack, you can give every single unit a blessing or a curse, which is crazy good. So you want to be making as many as possible, because they're 1 use only. Once you use a blessing or a curse after the battle, it's gone forever. So you want to be making them as much as possible. You know, it's not like a banner where you equip it to a unit and it just stays there until the unit dies or you lose it. It's, you know, you use it, you lose it, but you really want to be using them as much as possible and just making new ones as much as possible. So it's a really, really solid system. Easily my favorite in the game. There are I can't think of any mechanic off the top of my head, except for like maybe Throt the Unclean's system, that I enjoy as much. But then there's the Forbidden Hexes, which is her core campaign storyline mechanic. So Mother Ostankia's story revolves around you are trying to unlock 5 Forbidden Hexes, which once you unlock all 5 of them, they either combine or they reveal the path to a super hex. So the 5 hexes are extremely fun. The first one's a little basic in that it allows you to pick a land in your province that you control. So you just pick a place you control, and you just immediately wipe out all corruption and all instability from that. Or no, it's corruption only. Yeah, it's corruption only. So what's very nice about that is, like, if you're attacking Sylvania, you can attack a single settlement, occupy it, and then immediately use that buff, which I think it's called Purified Land, that hex, and it just knocks all of the corruption immediately to 0, which will screw over the vampire counts. It's the same thing for Chaos and all those other factions. Like, they get so many buffs from corruption. It's easy to forget how useful corruption is as a mechanic. Like, even if you're not using the attrition, just the base buffs it provides, like Zinch gets like bonus ammo and like barrier regeneration, and Khorne gets like damage buffs. You know, the vampire counts get like the ability for their units to be far better at coming back from the dead. Like, there's all sorts of, the Skaven get way more uses of like their summon, which is super annoying. So the fact that you can go in there and just be like, nope, fuck you, is hilarious and awesome. The empowered version, even which each of the forbidden hexes, you can empower it. When you click on the hex, there's a little triangle you can click to make it empowered. So the base version resets everything to 0. The empowered version resets everything to 0, makes it impossible for corruption to go up for 5 turns, which is really good if you're like actively fighting in a place that's generating a lot of corruption. But the other hexes are, not all of them are winners. Some are kind of like, that's okay. Like the final one is not super great. Not the Uber hex, but like the final of the base 5, which is a hex where you use it on an enemy settlement and it basically just spawns armies that attack it like every other turn. And the upgraded version just gives you better units. It takes a long time to get it, and then when you do get it, it's okay. It's not bad. Like if you use it in the right scenario, like you use it to give you some reinforcements if you're attacking a settlement, it can be insanely good. But it's not quite as fun as the others, because the others are stupid. Like there's Jinx Land, which allows you to target an enemy army in your territory, and you just nuke their campaign movement from orbit. And on top of that, you also make it where like their spells like cost way more to cast, along with some other debuffs. So it's brutally strong. And then the empowered version is just horseshit, because you target an enemy army in your territory and it locks them in place for 5 turns. And even the base version makes it impossible for them to use any other stance other than just move, or like raid stance or encampment stance. So like they can't teleport, they can't underway stance, they can't march, they can't do anything that would allow them to actually run away from you. And if you use the empowered version, they're stuck there for 5 turns. It is a brutal effect that is super fun. But my favorite one by far of the hexes is the teleport hex, which the base version allows you to teleport one of your armies to any magical forest in the world. This is extremely powerful, because if your goal is to go home to Kislev and take over Kislev, all you have to do is like teleport yourself to the Griffin Wood and you're basically there. But alternatively, you could just teleport to any forest you want in the world and just start a new empire there. However, the hilarious version is the Overcast version, because the empowered Forbidden Hex for the teleport allows you to target any army, including enemy armies. So if you see an enemy army like a 20 stack barreling down on one of your cities and you have that hex available, you could just go nope and just yeet them out of existence. So like let's say you're in Nagaroth and Malekith is coming down at you with a 20 stack, you could just grab Malekith's army and throw his ass all the way to the jungles of Xi'an in Grand Cathay, and there ain't jack shit he can do about it. He's gonna have to walk all the way back or die against something else, which is the much more likely option. So that is a hysterical ability. It is the trolliest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life in a Total War game. I get an obscene amount of use out of that. And then there's the Ultimate Hex, which the Ultimate Hex is your final campaign battle, and it's basically you pick a enemy faction that causes corruption. So it has to be one of the Chaos guys or Skaven or whatever. And you pick one of these chaos corrupting one of these corruption factions, and you just nuke them from orbit. Functionally, it's not terribly dissimilar to Deathmaster Snitch's ability, where he just deletes a faction. It's kind of like that, except for instead of it just being like an instant, they just die. Because like their legendary lord is permadead, which is what Snitch does. Instead, it's more of a like you hit them with so many debuffs. It's a permanent effect, but it's like you hit them with so many debuffs that there's literally nothing they can do. They're just dead. And they take like one of the most horrific forms of attrition that the game has, where they're like, I think it's like, it feels like 50 or 90% extra attrition damage like every turn or something. So if you see an enemy army and you use that big Ultra Hex on their faction, you can just watch as their army like dies instantly over the course of 1 or 2 turns. And their entire faction will just cease to exist. It is a delete button power, and it's very, very fun. It's super rewarding when you finally unlock it. But as for her units, Hag Witches, they're fun. They're all right. They're kind of, they're very similar to Mother Ostenkia. They ride around on a sled. They have more of a shotgun blast for their shooting attack, whereas Ostenkia has more of like an artillery shot where it like arcs up and hits down, and it's kind of like heat seeking. The Hag Witches just kind of do a shotgun blast, but it is pretty decent. It's strong, especially up close, and it has heavy armor piercing, so it's good at just blasting people. I will say that I am extremely disappointed by the lack of Hag Mothers. I feel like the Hag Mothers need to happen. I've talked about this a fair bit. If they were going to add anything to Shadows of Change, I mean literally anything, it has to be Hag Mothers, because Mother Ostankia does have a very weird experience where you do not get access to the entire Kislev roster with Mother Ostankia. Instead, you have a unique building tree for her faction that it has 5 tiers, and at the bottom 3 tiers, it lets you recruit a bunch of animals. So like tier 1 is like spider hatchlings and cave bats, and then tier 2 is giant spiders and something else, and then like tier 3 is feral bears and feral ice bears, which are all very good units. Like they're strong and they have a lot of really good uses, and they easily fill in your roster just fine. Like I don't even feel like I need the rest of the Kislev roster, but you can get all the other Kislev units, but to do so you have to make at least a defensive alliance with a faction that owns either Kislev, Prague, or Erengrad, just one of them. Or alternatively, you can just take one of those cities yourself. Whatever you decide to do, it's the same result. It'll just unlock the rest of the roster and you can recruit everything. But yeah, no, the Hag Mothers missing is super feels bad, man, because you like Mother Ostankia, like you have all these armies of like beasts and monsters and nightmarish spirits and all this crazy shit, but your armies are led by Gospodar Boyars and ice witches who are all also seemingly Gospodari. So like you're the Ungol faction, but you don't have any Ungol lords. You seem to have only Gospodar lords. So like you have these really rich looking asshole guys that your Mother Ostankia really probably wouldn't get along with most of the time, leading your armies of nightmarish creatures, beasts, and hags, and it feels really weird. It's very weird. So that definitely hurts the DLC quite badly. And that's something I'll kind of swing around to at the end. But as far as the new units go, the Akshina Ambushers are the only human unit you get, which are the Akshina. They're the secret police, and you seem to get the Ungol or like Ranger variant, which are the guys that patrol the Oblasts and like the more rural parts of Kislev, who are seemingly made up of mostly Ungols. And they're a very powerful unit. I would go so far as to say they kind of feel overtuned at the moment, because they make a lot of your other units like completely useless in comparison, because they have stock and ambush, and they're very good in close combat. They have pretty good range, and they have crossbows with severe armor piercing damage. So they just delete shit off the face of the earth, and can deploy anywhere they want, and they have stock most of the time, so they're invisible. And you can get them sniped very, very quickly, so they're even more invisible. So like they're just brutally efficient, and it kind of feels like they probably could use a debuff, or alternatively they just need to buff like the Streltsy at least, because like they make the Streltsy look like a joke. Like the Akshina Ambushers, they can fire in an arc, so they can fire over friendly units, and they have a much easier time drawing line of sight to enemy units. They can ambush, they can deploy wherever you want. They have woodsmen, so they're very effective at shooting from and fighting in the forest. They're effective combat fighters, and they're like as good as, if not better, at close combat fighting than the Streltsy are. And they also have like hardcore armor piercing ammo despite using crossbows. So like your Streltsy are just not as good. Like I still like taking Streltsy for different reasons, but yeah, the Akshina are like insane. I think I'd rather see the other units buffed, but I'll leave that up to the multiplayer community. They're usually good at figuring that out. The other units, the Things in the Woods. Things in the Woods are probably my favorite unit in the DLC. The horrifying dog bone spirit nightmare creatures. They're actually originally pulled from the Mordheim game, which is a really interesting call. But functionally, what they represent are like the nightmarish entities that lurk in the depths of the forest that make people disappear. They're the Things in the Woods. They don't even have an actual name, right? Though their actual name are Beowulfs. But they're very, very spooky to look at. They have awesome animations. They tear through fucking everything they run into. And like a really strong monstrous beast unit is surprisingly awesome for the Kislevite roster. You wouldn't think Kislev needed it, but no, it actually works quite well. They synergize super nicely with any of your cavalry units, whether it's your warbears or your Griffin Legion, or like just literally whatever. They synergize super nicely, and they can just tear through just about anything like paper. They're not as good at dealing with like individual characters or monsters, but they're awesome at like dealing with units and stuff. The Incarnate Elemental of Beasts, bit of a weird pick. I think I like him, especially because if you put the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts next to the things in the woods, it looks like it's a similar theme, right? It looks like there's a coherent idea there, which is why I'm cool with it. And it also makes sense that like the nightmarish spirit that lurks in the depths of the forest, and Incarnate Elemental of Beasts is a very reasonable pick for that. It's literally the embodiment of the Wind of Gur, the Wind of Beasts, which is the thing that goes bump in the night. So it's super terrifying, spooky looking. You know, it's kind of like the pop culture idea of a Wendigo on steroids, even though that's not actually what Wendigos look like. But you know, the whole thing where it's like the skull, the beast skull with the antlers, and then it's got all these like beast parts. Absolutely beautiful animations. Just some incredible animations. Very, very effective at literally killing anything and everything. And it has a permanent Flock of Doom going on around it, which is really nasty. Awesome unit. Super excited to see it. I do deeply hope, as I talked about in a video about Shadows of Change, that they add it to all beast wizards as a very high level summon, because it's literally just an embodiment of the lower beasts. But I do enjoy it in the Kislevite roster. I definitely would have really liked a Frost Fiend. You know, I would have liked a Kislevite specific spirit, like a Frost Fiend, which is like a giant ice bat monster, or like Leshens or something. There are a lot of really cool Kislevite spirits. Now, at the same time, I feel like they made good choices, because these units are very representative of what you expect the nightmarish things that Mother Ostankya summons from the wood to come get you at night would look like. And they're also pulling directly from actual tabletop minis, which is good. But it would have been cool to see something specific for Kislev. The Incarnate Elemental of Beast is also available for the Beastmen, which is great. Awesome. Like, if anybody's going to use an Incarnate Elemental of Beast, hell yeah, it would be the Beastmen, as well as Mother Ostankya. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Great. Yeah. For doing the same thing I did with the Changeling from like a 1 to 10 scale, because they're missing Hag Mothers, and it really like oofs the experience, I would probably put Mother Ostankya at like an 8. I'd say an 8.5. I'd say an 8.5. I don't think Hag Mothers are worth a full 2 points, but like, because like you could just kind of deal with it. Having a Boyar or an Ice Witch, it doesn't take me out of the experience. It's just kind of like, I would have really liked a Hag Mother, but I also really would have liked the lore of Hags. I understand why they didn't necessarily go with the lore of Hags, because technically the curses and blessings you get with Mother Ostankya and the hexes are a very accurate portrayal of how the lore of Hags would really work, in that it traditionally is represented as more of like hags and witches getting together around their cauldrons and in their little huts, and they gather all sorts of esoteric ingredients and like pieces of the people they want to bless or curse, and they like throw it in there and do these crazy little rituals and stuff, and then they make bargains with the spirits that like do the stuff for them. So like it's quite accurate how it's represented, but I still would have really liked a unique lore of magic. I do like that the hags have some fun gimmicks where they can do stuff like they can make their debuff spells last substantially longer than any other wizard. So like Mother Ostankya and any of your and they have lores of magic that are relatively debuff heavy with Death, Beasts, and Shadow, which are appropriate lores for them. But I would have really liked a lore of Hags. I would have really liked a lore of Hags. Yeah, like it would have been nice to see Mother Ostankya have a unique lore of magic. It would have been really nice to see Hag Mothers maybe have the lore of Hags. Like, I could see maybe Hag Witches, don't get the lore of Hags. They have to deal with like the more basic lores. But yeah. So yeah, 8.5. And then last, but certainly not least, is Grand Cathay. You remember how I said this video was going to be quick? So Grand Cathay got Yuan Bo, who's fantastic, super fun to play, very, very powerful. He is grossly powerful, I would say. Funny enough, if you like compare his skill tree to that of his siblings, he's in some ways the weakest while also the strong. He's the deadliest, I'll put it that way. He is by far the least durable of the three, because Zhao Ming gets regeneration as a built-in gimmick, as well as like tons of armor buffs and stuff, and Miao Ying has the Lore of Life, which makes her very good at keeping herself alive, and she gets a lot of really powerful buffs. Yuan Bo is pure offense instead of defense. He's just gonna kill your ass, because he has this brutal execution ability where at the start of the campaign, if you get below, I can't remember if it's, I want to say it's 20% health, he can literally just click on you and you die instantly. And even if you're not below 20% health, he can just click on you anyway and it deals a pretty hefty chunk of damage. And if he goes all the way up his combat tree, he can upgrade his execution ability so that he insta-kills you at 33% health or less, which is crazy. But he's probably, what's interesting about him compared to the other Dragon Kids is he's debatably my favorite to keep in human form. He feels really good in human form, and I think that's because he has very unique animations. He also has like a big fucking two-handed sword that he's fighting with. So, and his abilities tend to synergize better with him in human form. It's like I tend to prefer Zhao Ming and Miao Ying in dragon form, but I tend to prefer Yuan Bo in human form, which is quite interesting, and I think is a good nod to how they designed him. That being said, his dragon form is quite powerful, as you would expect. The one thing that's a little weird about his dragon form is that one of the gimmicks when your characters transform into dragons is that they lose all of their spells except for one, which is kind of like the spell they're really good at in dragon form, right? And they also lose access to most of their abilities. What's interesting about Yuan Bo is Yuan Bo keeps access to his executioner ability even in dragon form. So it's really good for like chasing down a fleeing character and executing them. But he does not get access to his spell until quite late. In that Zhao Ming, his spell, which is the Fire Breath spell from Yang, he has it like level 1 or level 2. He gets it very, very quickly. And so you have a spell that you can cast in dragon form, which is very nice. Miao Ying and Yuan Bo are kind of the same in that their spells are much higher up, because Miao Ying, it's her talons, her yin spell, the dragon talons of darkness or whatever, which is a very, very strong spell, but it's a little further up her casting tree. And the same thing for Yuan Bo. His dragon spell is Common of Cansandora, which is an awesome spell, very high up your tree. But yeah, Yuan Bo, super good. He is the strongest wizard of the three in that he actually has access to Greater Arcane Conduit, and he has an additional ability he can get, which increases his spell intensity by like another 10%. So if you actually delve into his spell casting tree, he will do obscene amounts of damage with his damage spells. And he has a very interesting mix, because he has the Lore of Light, the Lore of Yin, the Lore of Yang, and the Lore of Heavens. So he's got a pretty weird set of spells, but it works quite nicely for him. Yeah, no, he's awesome. Very, very cool character. And they all have magic items now, which is quite nice. Though his are better, I think, than his siblings. But yeah, he's fun. As far as his campaign mechanics go, he has the expanded compass. The really nice thing about the expanded compass is it affects all the Cathayan factions, not just him. And the compass as a whole has been like significantly buffed. I covered this more in like my free LC video. But he has 4 new directions that you unlock through his campaign. You have to go to specific locations and build a unique landmark building called Astromantic Relays, which will give you permanent buffs, which functionally just gives you a teeny tiny bit more magic, but it gives you like way more Astromancer slots. And every time you finish one of these buildings, a bunch of lizardmen will attack you because you're tapping into the geomantic weapon. They don't appreciate it. But once you have built the building, which always takes 5 turns, and you have weathered the storm of lizardmen attacks, you get access to the new compass direction. And these new compass directions give you some like really powerful buffs. Like my favorite one is there's one that gives you just like an obscene amount of bonus experience to all your characters, which is hilarious. So he has 8 directions he can point the compass in once you get all upgraded, which is quite nice and helps. And it feels, all of the campaigns I think do a very good job of telling interesting stories, but Yuan Bo feels more connected to the rest of the Warhammer world than Ostenkia and the Changeling do. Like Ostenkia and the Changeling kind of feel like they're just doing their own thing. Yuan Bo feels very much like he is an extension of the Grand Cathay stories that we've already seen in Warhammer 3 so far, which I think is really cool. His other mechanic, which is by far his most unique one and powerful one, is Matters of State. So Yuan Bo has this big old list of edicts he can hand out through Matters of State. Some of them are grossly powerful abilities. They cost you these unique resource called Stone and Steel, and whenever you spend them, however much points you spent of a resource, it immediately converts into the other kind of resource, but takes a couple of turns to like come off cooldown. So like there's an ability that costs you 2 steel. When you use that ability, those 2 steel points will immediately convert into 2 stone points, but they're on cooldown for like 5 turns. Though you can speed up the cooldown by winning battles. So if you're fighting a lot, you can use your edicts more often, and you can increase the amount of those little points, stone and steel points you have, by using, I think, 4 of them at a time to create merchant districts and military districts. Something like that, or I think it's like a commerce district and a military district. But these allow you, those districts allow you to choose a major city, a major settlement that is at least tier 3. And if you do that, it gives them a shit ton of really powerful buffs. So if you pick a commerce district, it buffs all of your buildings that have nothing to do with the military. So like any of your unique resource buildings, any of your income buildings, any of that stuff. Whereas the military expansion, or the military district, does the exact opposite. It buffs all of your garrison buildings and all of your military unit buildings. And these grant you faction-wide buffs that are quite powerful. I mean, we're talking levels of shit where like you can get a buff that makes it through the military buildings. You can get a buff that's like any unit that's recruited in that province gets a permanent buff to their armor that they wouldn't get anywhere else, which is crazy. But he also has access to some really powerful abilities that are a little cheaper. There's stuff where you can instantly complete all of the construction that's going on in a settlement. So you just pick a settlement and boom, everything's done. There's one where you can pick an army and it immediately finishes a turn of recruitment. So if you're recruiting some units and they have 1 turn left, they're instantly recruited. And if you have like a whole bunch of units you're recruiting, it just knocks them all down by 1, which is great. There's other stuff like you can pick one that makes it where you don't suffer from any military access penalties. So you can just run through people's territory. There's another one that's really funny and quite powerful that allows you to reset your diplomatic situation. So like, you're considered very reliable. And then let's say you turn around and declare war on one of your military allies, which obviously, makes you look like a dick. And you like deal a bunch of damage. You can immediately use that Matter of State ability and it resets your reliability to very reliable instantly, which is super funny. But there's all sorts of like goofy fun little abilities you can do with that. There's a ton of them. Some of them make items for you. Some of them can also give you like permanent buffs to your entire faction. But that's very much what his campaign revolves around, is really trying to unlock, you start with 4 points, 2 stones, 2 steel. And so like if you use 2 stone points, then you'll have 4 steel points. So 2 of them are on cooldown for a little bit, but your goal is to get up to having 8 points total. Once you have the 8 points, then you can really like mess around with all the powerful abilities and stuff. But yeah, that's Yuan Bo. As far as his new units go, you have the Celestial General. Celestial General is a fantastic new lord. Big melee guy, carries a huge 2-handed hammer. He's able to ride either a horse or a flying horse thing, the Jade Longma. So he synergizes very nicely with literally any combat unit in your army, which is fantastic. He also has a bunch of really cool buffs. He can make your armies extremely powerful. And he's just fun. He's just a really fun character and is really good at just beating the crap out of people. And he's very heavily armored as well, which is nice. As far as the actual new units go, you have the Onyx Crowmen. The Onyx Crowmen are kind of one of the MVPs. They're an extremely powerful low-tier unit. They are about as durable as a piece of wet tissue paper. However, they're quite fast, and if they get onto something, the vast majority of time, they're going to rip it to pieces, unless it has really high armor. They deal a crazy amount of damage. The only thing that's a little weird about them is that they are a Yang unit, because they deal, they're a melee unit, so they count as Yang. However, very explicitly in their background and lore, they are a Yin unit. Like, they are made of Yin. They are literally creations of Yin. And yet they count as Yang, which is odd. And the reason that's odd is one of the other units, which is the Jet Lion, is a big melee monster that is a Yin unit, because from a lore standpoint, it's Yin. It's made of, it uses Yin energy. It's made of it's powered by Yin magic. And so, if they're going to apply the logic that the Jet Lion is a Yin unit because of the lore, so it counts as Yin despite the fact it's a melee unit, I feel like that should also apply to the Onyx Crowmen, where they should also be a Yin unit, because you can't have it both ways, in my opinion. You pick a lane. Either all melee units are Yang, or units should determine their harmony based on what their lore. Just pick a lane. But yeah, Onyx Crowmen, awesome unit. If you're playing Grand Cathay, you're going to be using a lot of them. And then there's the Lions. I already mentioned the Jet Lion, but there's two of them. There's the Jet Lion and the Jade Lion. They're functionally the same unit. They're like a mid-tier monster. They're quite durable, really cool animations. They have two very different functions though. The Jet Lion is a Yin unit, which is very unique because it means he can run around with all your melee units and give them their harmony buffs, which is really, really cool. But he's far more defensive, has higher melee defense, is better at, he has natural spell resistance, so he's better at kind of being dealt damage. He's a little more survivable. He has bound spell being Missile Mirror, so he has 2 charges of Missile Mirror where you can just run him out, and if somebody tries to shoot him, you just cast Missile Mirror on them and all their ranged attacks will reflect back at them, which is hilarious. And he also has an aura that grants spell resistance to nearby allies, which spell resistance is by far the least interesting. Well, okay, I guess flame resistance is the worst, but spell resistance is not much better. It's only good against magic that deals damage. It'd be really, really nice if spell resistance lowered how long debuffs lasted on you as well, but I don't think that's what it does. I think it literally just mitigates damage from spells, which is just very specific, But then there is the Jade Lion. The Jade Lion is not as defensive. It is far more aggressive, so it has much higher melee attack and stuff. Oh, actually, the other really good thing about the Jet Lion is that it removes physical resistance with its melee attacks, which is very, very good against specific things. So demons, the Jet Lion is fucking fantastic because it can just run in there and start ripping into people, and if it hits you in melee, it increases your chances of miscasting, and it lowers physical resistance because it has Disrupt, which is very, very good in a surprising amount of scenarios. So it's not a bad unit. Now, the Jade Lion is ridiculous. The Jade Lion, instead of Missile Mirror, which is a pretty conditional spell because it reflects range attacks and you kind of have to time it right so that you make sure you maximize how many volleys you're reflecting back at them. He just has the Yang Fire Breath spell, except for the effects have been changed, so it's Jade Lion Breath instead. And so he just has a nice big fat flame template damage spell, which is great in any scenario. Also, his attacks grant the flammable debuff. So whenever he cuts or whenever he hits anybody, they gain weakness to fire, which can synergize very, very strongly with a lot of your units. Furthermore, he does have he counts as a Yang unit. If you're playing Yuan Bo, you can actually upgrade him to count as spell mastery. So if you have him on the battlefield, he makes all your wizards spells hit harder, which is very nice. And then he has an aura, and I am really struggling to remember what it is. But whatever, y'all are adults, you can figure it out. But it's very good. Jade Lion is fucking awesome. And then the last is the Zengu War Drum, which can be very unassuming at first, but is a genuinely, it is a powerhouse of a unit. It counts as yin and yang. So no matter where you put it on the battlefield, it is granting awesome harmony buffs to everyone nearby. I believe it also provides harmony amplifier as well, if memory serves. So it's actually like buffing the harmony buffs that you're getting. Furthermore, it has like a passive bonus that grants leadership to everybody nearby. And then it has 2 stances. So it's like the War Dancers of the Wood Elves or Festus the Leech Lord, where it has 2 buttons. And if you click one button, then that button stays active until you click the other button. So it has 2 drum beats. So there's one drum beat that is for defense that increases the armor of everyone nearby. And then, and it's like a pretty big radius. And then there's like the war beat, where there's the aggressive beat that I want to say improves melee attack. And I think it also gives immune to psychology, I want to say. That might not be right, but because there's also a Regiment of Renown version that has a 3rd special drum beat, and I want to say that one gives like magic attacks and something else. But it could be that the regular one gives melee attack and magic attacks, and then the ROR one gives immune to psych. No, I'm pretty sure the basic one has immune to psych. But anyway, it's a really powerful unit because the leadership buff and the guaranteed harmony buff alone are very powerful. But its radius for its bonuses are huge, and it's very simple to use. You use the armor buff until the enemy gets close, and then you do the melee buff. Like, super simple unit to use. And it's just got Oxen pulling it, so it's not particularly good at combat, but you can throw it into combat if you want. It's reasonably tanky. Not super tanky, but decently tanky. And though hilariously, if you go through the Grand Cathay tech tree, there is a tech you get rather late in the tech tree that gives it like plus 400 armor piercing damage or something stupid. So it becomes like surprisingly deadly if it lands a hit, which is very funny to me. But I really like the Zengu War Drum. Literally my only complaint about it is I think the Lord Magistrate should be able to use it as a mount, because right now, like, he goes foot, horse, lantern, the flying sky lantern thing, which, like, the sky lantern's all right, especially because his rework skill tree actually makes him way fucking stronger when he's on that thing. But the war drum seems like it would synergize so well with the Lord Magistrate, because his whole thing is that he's a support character. So like, I think having the Zengu war drum being his big final mount would be really cool. But yeah, anyway, that's it. So that's everything that's in the DLC. Grand Cathay, I would have liked a hero. I don't need a hero for them, but I would have liked like a melee hero. I would give Grand Cathay probably like a 9.5, maybe a 9. Probably like a 9.5. If I could have gotten a hero, that little last 0.5 would have kicked it up. Now, granted, I want to be clear, this is DLC only conversation. I'm not talking about the free LC stuff. I'm not talking about rework stuff, because that has nothing to do with the DLC. If you are purchasing Shadow of Change, this is the stuff you will get as part of your purchase. So, like, I'm not talking about, like, how I would have liked more Ivory Road changes to Cathay, or how, like, I would have liked a couple of changes to Kislev mechanics, because that's not related to the DLC. So, that brings us to the end of this discussion and to my overall thoughts. My overall thoughts are as follows. I really, really, really like Shadows of Change. I really like Shadows of Change. When I initially saw the announcement, I definitely had some concerns as far as I was a little disappointed with the announcement of the Changeling. I was really hoping for like Egrim von Horseman, or initially I thought like, oh, the Blue Scribes would be a better character, but like, granted, I think they made the right choice is where I'm going with that. The Changeling is super duper fun and has just some fucking fantastic mechanics. So I do like him a lot. I think all of the legendary lords are kick-ass. They feel very well developed. What's very good about it, compared to especially old lord packs, is that not only do each of them have very fun, consistent themes, but they all also have story campaigns that work in the Realm of Chaos campaign and Immortal Empires. So even if you're playing with Immortal Empires with them, you still get all the cutscenes, you still get all the dialogue, you still get all the quest battles, and you still have the final quest battle. It's the exact same experience, which is so nice. I really, really dislike that when you play Immortal Empires with most races in the game, you completely miss their unique stories. because there's like a lot of beauty and fun and character development to be found in those cutscenes, and they're just completely absent from Warhammer 3's Immortal Empires, which sucks. I hate that. Like the story should be a part of it. It's like the Champions of Chaos characters should still be doing the whole Champions of Chaos thing, instead of just kind of farting around. And like certain stories, like, yeah, sure, the Vortex campaign, whatever, fine. Though I still just like those little movies. But fine. But like the individual character stories, like there's no reason for those to be exclusive to their initial games. Like the Beastmen have functionally held on to their stories. But like, there's no reason that you shouldn't get all the movies and everything for if you're playing Oxiodal and Tarax, because you're still basically doing that thing. So I'm really happy they did that with this DLC. That's a good change. The other thing I really like is that you can tell these are some of the best designed characters because their mechanics carry through the entire game. Regardless of how long you're playing a campaign, you will be using their mechanics a lot. And to be honest, you don't even get a lot of their best mechanics until fairly late in the campaign, which is going to encourage you to keep playing even after you win. Like Mother Ostankia, you don't really get access to like her last 2 hexes until, fairly late in your playthrough. Yuan Bo, same thing. His Matters of State, it's pretty difficult to have like unlocked all 8 of your slots until you're a fair bit done with your story campaign. So like these are characters who you very realistically can achieve a major victory, or an ultimate victory actually, and yet you'll probably be like, oh, I'm gonna keep playing because I'm having fun, and I like got access to this mechanic not too long ago, so I'm just gonna kind of explore it. The Changeling, not as much, but his schemes are also so fun, and they have like fun little stories and stuff to them that you can just kind of keep going. But I very much enjoy all their experiences. All of their mechanics hold out through their entire campaign. There are plenty of characters I can point to who have mechanics that tend to fall off at a certain point. Like a good example, like the Sisters of Twilight's mechanic can be a little once you like have all of the items and you get them all like fairly well upgraded. Or though they're not as good an example because there's actually been some good changes made. Eltharion the Grim is a perfect example. Once Eltharion the Grim like unlocks all of Atho Tamara, there's literally nothing else to do with him. Like that mechanic just kind of like there's nothing more to do. You can't like use the way you expand his little city and stuff. There's nothing else you can really do with that resource. Or like the vampire counts. Eventually you run out, like eventually you buy all of the bloodlines and then blood kisses are completely useless. There's nothing you can do with them. The Empire has the like electoral machinations system, which is completely useless after you've confederated the Empire. Like there's a lot of people don't like Kislev's mechanics in that like the supporter devotion system. Like once you've maxed out the supporters, you're kind of just done. You confederate Kostalton or Katarin, and then you're like, oh, all right. Like, you still have the invocations at least, so you can still use those to get the buffs. But like devotion at that point is kind of a useless resource. And the odds of you spending it are not that great because, invocations have a reasonable cooldown. So it's not like you can spam those. So it's, it falls off. These 3 do not fall off. Their systems are like awesome. The entire like early campaign, mid campaign, late campaign, post campaign, fantastic mechanics, which is very, very good. That is extremely rare. Usually it's like, not like a lot of characters have gotten much better. It's not as bad as it used to be. Like and there are a number of characters that do have mechanics that keep going, but not a lot of characters had that right from the starting line, and all 3 of these guys do, which I think is really solid. There are 2 problems I have with this DLC. One of them, which I've already waxed lyrical about on the my other video for like the Shadows of Change pricing and shit, is that I really feel that they dropped the ball on the generic characters. Like if these DLCs are going to be this big, which I'm totally fine with, then they need to fill up all the generic character slots. There is literally no reason they could not have done a Chaos Lord of Tzeentch and like a Zongor Shaman hero, or like just a Chaos Exalted or a Tzeentch Exalted hero. Even that would have been fine. You know, they could have done a Chaos Lord of Tzeentch and an Exalted hero of Tzeentch, and I would have been like, cool, yeah, whatever. And then, you know, Mother Ostenka, Hag Mothers were a must. That was a huge oversight. That was a fucking colossal oversight, in my opinion. That's an embarrassing level of oversight, because the faction feels incomplete because of that. Very strange decision. And then Yuan Bo, I think a Gatemaster hero would have gone a long way. Like a nice, solid melee hero who is tanky and has Guardian, and his whole gimmick is to protect other characters. Awesome, great. Call it a day. That is the biggest glaring failure of Shadows of Change. There are not enough generic characters. There are 2 between 3 factions. 1 lord, 1 hero. That is not enough. That is not even near enough. And like looking ahead to Thrones of Decay, they better fucking not. You know, like Thrones of Decay better have 2 per race. You know, I want Empire Wizard Lords and like Empire Engineer heroes, and then I need a Chaos Lord of Nurgle and a Chaos Sorcerer of Nurgle, because right now Nurgle's got the Chaos Sorcerer Lord and the Exalted hero, but he doesn't have a melee Lord or a caster hero. Like there's no caster hero of Nurgle unless you take the demon, which is weird. Like Festus cannot get a hero caster of Nurgle, and that is a bizarre feeling. And then the dwarfs, you know, the dwarfs are not, well, no, the dwarfs are the exact same. You know, give me a Guildmaster Engineer Lord, he's all shooting and stuff, or give me a Demon Slayer Lord. And then I expect a Dragon Slayer hero or like a Priestess of Valea hero. I do not think those are unreasonable expectations, especially if they're going to charge $25. When it comes to the price, I can't answer that for y'all. I cannot in good faith say I think a DLC is worth it or not worth it, because I have a very skewed perspective, and I acknowledge that. And I just, the only thing I can do is own it. Like I play Games Workshop intellectual property games for a hobby, like all my hobbies. Like I collect their books, I buy their minis, I buy their stupid dice and their little cards and like all this other dumb shit that I don't need. And it's very, very expensive. It is grossly expensive. I mean, we're talking about hardcover books that aren't that thick. They're like maybe 100 pages, and they cost anywhere from like $30 to $50, usually closer to $50. Army books that only have a single faction's lore in it, and the lore is sometimes kind of garbage, and it's $50. Or miniatures. I'm buying a single mini that cost me $30 to $80 to $100, and that's unpainted and unassembled. You know, I bought a whole bunch of Seraphon. I don't want to paint them. Like, I don't like painting that much. It's not an enjoyable experience for me, so I pay other people to paint it. It costs me hundreds or thousands of dollars. Like, I am not a good judge of character of how expensive something is. Because Shadows of Change, I get all that for $25. Whoa, sign me up. Like, it doesn't, like, I've come out against the cost because I realize that for people who have been buying the content up until this point, it is a sudden price hike. And I totally get that. But in the same breath, I also would have bought it. You know, even if CA had come out with a collector's edition of Shadows of Change, where you got like, I don't know, a booklet of concept art and additional lore and maybe like a mini, and it was like $100, I would have bought it in a heartbeat, you know, because it's just the way this hobby is. So I don't feel comfortable like telling you if Shadows of Change is worth it or not. What I do feel comfortable of is saying that I do think it is extremely fun. I do think it is one of the best DLCs they have released. As far as like Lord Pack stuff goes, like I still think a race pack is an overall like better experience, but it's also like a much more condensed kind of like self-contained fun time. Whereas this, you're branching out into other things. I do also very much like that a lot of the DLC is available to other races, so it's not just these 3 races are benefiting. You're also getting new units for the Beastmen. You're getting new units for the Warriors of Chaos. You're getting new units for the Demons of Chaos. I think that's all super cool and like it a lot. I think there are changes they can do that, like, if they can figure out, which I know they can do it, because like people have pointed out to me that there are skill points that are like skills that are locked behind DLCs. Like you can own a race and not have all of its DLC, so certain mounts won't be available to you. So in light of that, they can absolutely do stuff like the summonable incarnate elemental of beasts for beast wizards, but it's locked behind the DLC, right? And it's like a level 40 skill that lets you summon on the battlefield. That would be kick ass, and it would make the DLC add content to almost every single race in the game, which if you're going to be charging that much money, the big thing is that I think you need to fill out your slots. So if you're going to charge $25, at minimum, 2 generic characters per race, 1 legendary hero that goes to somebody, at least 3 units, 1 of which has to be a monster, preferably 2 of which, and then unique good mechanics for each of the legendary lords. Do I think that is a worthwhile experience? Yes. Is it worth $25? I don't know. That's up to you. I will say though that there's nothing wrong with not buying it right now. Feel free to wait for it to go on sale. It's gonna go on sale. While the main games are not necessarily the best about going on good sales, the DLCs tend to be. They tend to go on like pretty hilarious sales like relatively quickly. So I would not be shocked to see Shadows of Change show up in the Steam winter sale in December for like 20+% off. So yeah, take that all into your consideration. Overall, like I said, I think Shadows of Change is excellent. It's not perfect. It needs Hag Mothers. In my opinion, to be a complete experience, it needs Hag Mothers. There are several other things they can do to push it closer to being perfect. They can add in some more generic characters, and they can rework the Zongors to make them better. And then, some of the other changes I recommended would, I think, really push this towards a perfect DLC. Yeah. Hag Mothers, I think, are a must. Without the Hag Mothers, it is a pretty good. With Hag Mothers, I would say it's just flat out good. And if they gave us the 3 other generic characters I'm asking for, put the Cockatrice in the Beastman roster, which should be very easy. Put the Incarnate Elemental Beast as a summon, which should be fairly easy. And the Zengu War Drum as a mount for the Lord Magistrate, fairly easy. Then I would say it's a perfect DLC. Price notwithstanding. So hopefully that helps. I apologize if you were hoping for something a little more concrete when it comes to price, but the more I've sat and thought about it, the more I've realized that I'm just not really in a comfortable position to do that. I have no problem coming out against the DLC as far as how sudden the price change was. I think they dunked that up really bad, and literally all they had to do was like start preparing people maybe like a couple weeks in advance, being like, hey guys, just a heads up, like prices are going to go up, and here's like kind of why, and like here we're going to break down our process and explain what's going on. And they could have built up to it instead of just coming out of like fucking left field and being like, look, it's like 50% more expensive. That being said, I do think this is like one of the best pieces of content they've ever made. So like, not only am I in a weird place because my understanding of the value of money is very messed up when it comes to Warhammer IP, but this is also like a really good piece of content. And it's weird because like it's missing things that I think would make the experience significantly closer to perfection, but it's also like a really, like none of those things are really hurting my experience, They're just things that I think would make my experience better. It's weird. I don't know. This is a really weird scenario for me. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Hopefully that was like vaguely interesting to listen to, and can, at the very least, I hope it can provide you with information so that you can make an informed decision. There we go. That's what I was trying to get around to. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you have any questions or comments for me, please leave them down below and I'll try and get around to them at some point. And I hope you all have a lovely day and week and month and year and etc. And stay cool out there if you're in Texas like me, where it's still hot as shit. So thank you all for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.